Miss Rogers here. Today we're going to do subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So I know fractions is everyone's favorite topic to do in math. Not really, but we're going to have fun with fractions today. Okay, so when we subtract fractions with unlike denominators, there is a set of rules we have to follow to be able to subtract fractions. Okay, because we know when we have to add and subtract fractions, we have to have like denominators. So both ways when we do a certain operation with fractions, when we are either adding or subtracting, we have to get like denominators. Okay, so if you notice on my board right here, I have a couple rules, or it's 3 rules, that you have to do when you're subtracting fractions. So number 1 is you need to make sure the denominators are the same. So if you get to a fraction problem when you're subtracting them and you have unlike denominators, your first step is to make the denominators like denominators. Okay, then step number 2, when you have like denominators, then you're just going to subtract the numerators straight across. Okay, so you would just subtract the 2 numerators, and then whatever that answer is, that's your new numerator. And then the last step is to drag the denominator over. So when we're working with fractions and we are either adding or subtracting them, when you get the like denominator, your last step is to just drag the denominator over. You do not want to add or subtract that denominator because you've worked so hard to get that denominator the same with both fractions. You don't want to come up with a whole different denominator. Okay, so this will make more sense when I get into an example. Okay, so if I were to give you the example 2/4, and I want you to subtract 5/12. Okay, your first step is to make it like denominators. Okay, so when you look at these fractions, your first thing you should notice, or the light bulb that should be going off in your head, is my denominators are unlike. So that means I cannot subtract these fractions yet because I need to make like denominators. Okay, so I need to make 4 and 12 look like denominators with a certain denominator. Okay, when I look at the numbers 4 and 12, I know that 4 can go into 12. Okay, so I can change this first fraction to get a fraction that has a denominator of 12. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to work with this first fraction first, but my new denominator that I'm going to work with is 12. Okay, so I'm going to work with the denominator 12 because 12 is a multiple of 4. Okay, so now what I need to look at is I need to figure out how can I go from having a denominator of 4 to having a denominator of 12. Well, if I look right here, to go from 4 to 12, all I'm doing, I'm only multiplying by 3 because 4 times 3 is 12. Okay, so if I multiplied my denominator by 3 to get 12, well, I need to do that with my numerator because when we deal with fractions, what we do to the top, we have to do to the bottom. In this case, what we did to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So I'm going to take my numerator and multiply it by 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, a good way to go back and look at this fraction is going to be easy to be able to do this. 2 is half of 4, so that means 6 is going to be half of 12. So that means I did my math correct to get this. So my new fraction that I'm going to work with from going from 2/4 is 6/12 because I want that denominator of 12. Okay, so then if I come to my fraction over on the right, I notice my denominator is already in 12, so I'm not going to have to do any math to that. So I'm just going to bring that fraction down. Okay, so my new problem now, it's the same problem, it's just a new set of denominators. Okay, is 6/12 and 5/12. I'm going to subtract them. I know that my denominators are like now, so I can go ahead and subtract them. 6 take away 5 is 1. And then I'm just going to drag the denominator over, so 12. Okay, so my answer is 1/12. Okay, so if I went back up to my top of it that had my original problem, 2/4 minus 5/12 is 1/12. All I did was I made like denominators, then I subtracted my numerators, and then just dragged my denominator over. Okay, let's do another example of where we have to work with a new set of denominators. Okay, so if I was to give you the fraction 4/7, and I want you to take away 4/8. Okay, if you notice in this problem right here, my denominators are unlike. Okay, and to be able to subtract fractions, I need to have like denominators. So I need to find a new set of denominators to work with to be able to subtract my two fractions. Okay, this problem is different than the one I just gave you because the other one we were able to do easy math to get like denominators. Well, if I look right here, I know 7 is not a multiple of 8, and I know 8 is not a multiple of 7. So that means I'm going to have to do a little more math to be able to come up with a like denominator. Okay? When I think of 7 and 8, I need to come up with a multiple that both of them share that goes both into 7 and to 8. And when I look at 7 and 8, the first multiple I think about is 56. Okay? Because 56 is a common multiple of both 7 and 8. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have common denominators or like denominators of 56 for both of these, for both fractions. Okay? So if I look at my first fraction, I have 4/7. To go from dealing with the denominator of 7ths to dealing with a denominator of 56, to go from 7ths to 56, I'm going to have to multiply my denominator 8 times, okay? Because 7 times 8 is 56, okay? And again, what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So what I'm going to do to the top is multiply my numerator by 8 also. And I know 4 times 8 is 32. Okay, so all I did with this first fraction is take my denominator of 7, change it into a denominator of dealing with 56, and I did the same thing with my numerator. To go from 7 to 56, I had to multiply by 8, so I had to multiply my numerator by 8 to get 32. All right. So if I look at my second fraction, now I'm going from having a denominator of 8 to a denominator of 56. To go from 8 to 56, I have to multiply by 7. 8 times 7 is 56. Again, what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to take my fourths right here and multiply that by 7 also. So I know 4 times 7 is 28. Okay? So what I did in this fraction is I started working with a denominator of 8, but then I had to go from having a denominator of 8 to a denominator of 56. And how I did that was I multiplied by 7, and I did that with my numerator. 4 times 7 is 28. So now my new set of fractions that I have that have like denominators is 32/56 and 28/56. Okay? So when I go to subtract these fractions, 32 take away 28 is 4. Okay? Then my last step is to just drag the denominator over. So my denominator would be 56. Again, you don't want to subtract those denominators because you've worked this hard to get like denominators up to this point. You don't want to come up with a whole different set of denominators. Okay? So that's why I just dragged the denominators over. Okay, let's do one more example to make sure that you're on the same page and that you can rock out subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Right, so if I gave you the problem, 3/4, and I want you to subtract 2/6. Okay, so the first thing that you should notice about this problem is my denominators are unlike. This first fraction has a denominator of 4. My second fraction has a denominator of 6. They are not like denominators, so we're going to have to make them like denominators. Okay? So what I need to do, I need to come up with the multiple that both 4 and 6 share. Okay? So the way you do that is just coming up with a number that both numbers share. And when I look at 4 and 6, the first number I think of is 24. So my new denominator I'm going to have with both of these fractions is 24ths. okay? Because that is the first multiple that both of these numbers share, all right? So when I look at my first fraction, 3/4, when I'm looking at my fourths being my denominator, now I'm going to change it into 24ths. So to go from fourths to 24ths, what I did is I multiplied by 6, okay? So 24 is 6 times greater than 4, okay? Because 4 times 6 is 24. So now I need to do that with my numerator. I need to make my new numerator 6 times bigger, okay? So 3 times 6 is 18, okay? When I go over to my second fraction, if I'm going from 6 to 24ths, I'm only going to get 4 times greater. Okay, so I'm going to be 24 is 4 times greater than 6. 6 times 4 is 24. So I'm going to do that with my numerator, make my numerator 4 times bigger. 2 times 4 is 8. Okay? All right, so now what we're going to do is now we're going to subtract them. So if I was to solve this now, my new fractions with like denominators is 18/24 and 8/24. All right? I'm going to subtract my numerators because that's my next step. So 18 take away 8 is 10. Okay, then I'm going to drag my numerator over, or denominator over, sorry, for 24ths. So my answer is 10/24. So if I go back to the top that has my original problem, 3/4 take away 2/6 is the same or is equal to 10/24, right? I know fractions isn't a common favorite math topic to talk about in math class, but I believe as a teacher, the more that you as students get to know fractions and you work with fractions, the more you're going to get better at fractions. So with more practice, you're going to eventually be experts with fractions and be able to do any type of operation with fractions. I hope this video helped you guys with subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Until next time, see you later.